1. I'll try to keep the details brief. My company has been contacted by another company to repair equipment. This is done in work cells hosted in a building owned and run by the company contracting us. So we need to follow quite a few of their rules. During pre-operation, we had a skeleton crew setting up work cells, sourcing tools, yada yada yada. Unfortunately, we ran into a situation which I had to make a run to the hardware store last minute in the middle of the day to avoid some other things running behind. Apparently, this caused a shitstorm, as my boss put it. Our point of contact was up in arms about the fact that I timed out, we're paid salary, at 2:45 p.m. We all got together on the phone and I kindly explained I went to do business-related things. My boss deemed that was more than fair and that our point of contact has no reason to be upset. The next morning when I came in, our point of contact was giving me a further ration of shit in a conversation that went something along the lines of, "You timed out much earlier than your scheduled off time yesterday, don't do that again." We've already explained to you that I was doing business and remaining focused on our goal here. To get our work cells set up for a start date? No, you need to take care of those things outside of the time you're scheduled here. That's not acceptable. I will not allow you to think it's okay for me to be working off the clock. If you'd like, we can open a dialogue on negotiating overtime or supplemental pay. No, we don't want to do that. We pay you to set up work cells and organize tools only. You don't do anything else. Great. Please outline that in an email, that way I can better communicate that to my team. So our point of contact does. Unfortunately, our job currently entails much, much more. We organize deliveries, we check drivers in, we direct freight and docking, we attend meetings to organize happenings for the week, and on and on. For 2 weeks, anytime anything came up, we delegated these tasks to our point of contact, citing their outline of, "You set up work cells and organize tools only." Things fell very far behind. I think the final straw was when our point of contact told us we needed to get a particular PPE on Friday. Not required by us, but required by their guidelines. Our start date for 60 additional people was negotiated for the following Monday. Again, I told our point of contact that I will not shop for business-related things on personal time. On Monday, the 60 new hires arrived. Because they were missing the specific PPE required last minute, they were technically unable to start doing anything, according to their safety standards. At this point, we're all being paid to do, well, nothing. So I touched base with our point of contact to ask if, now that our negotiated tasks looked different since the transition of the start date, if he'd be so kind as to let me take care of company business on company time. That way, we can get the ball rolling on things. He told me not to do anything at all, and that he'd get in touch with my boss. From what I understand, a handful of people got dragged into it. Lots of phone calls, lots of pissed off people. The whole 9 yards. This went on for the entire day. Meanwhile, our crew was just chopping it up and getting to know one another. Mind you, still being paid per the negotiations. Come Tuesday, essentially the same thing happens. Any inquiries that came my way was met with something like, "Our point of contact made the executive decision to outline our specific job duties during our setup period." Despite what we had negotiated, they deemed it necessary to make, in my opinion, arbitrary and baseless decisions on how we should spend our time during our setup period. During the last 2 weeks, they had every opportunity to reconcile any hastily made decisions, but chose not to do so. This morning, our point of contact was gone. Apparently, their absence has been a complete sigh of relief for many, many people in the building. I always figured they just thought they could boss us around, because we were the new kids on the block. But I guess he was always a controlling meathead from what others have said. I don't know exactly where I stand with my company at this point, but I'm hopeful they'll see the humor in everything in hindsight. 2. 10 years ago, I was really obsessed with a card game called Biriba. There was an online website where you could play it. Each player had a ranking that would go up or down depending on your wins or losses. If you chose to forfeit a game, you would lose points. The only way not to lose any points while playing the game was either to win or have the other player forfeit. A Bariba game usually lasts around 40 to 45 minutes. Before you start a game, you open a table, you set the table preferences, and wait for the opponent to join. One of the preferences is how much time each player gets every turn they make. Each player gets a specific amount of time that resets every time the player takes a turn. The typical time most players choose is 1 minute, and they rarely use the whole minute. They usually play within seconds. You choose the table preferences you want and wait for the other player to join and accept them. A lot of the opponents try to win by deception, meaning they set the time for each player at the maximum, 5 minutes, then take the whole 5 minutes each turn they make. They only take their turn right before their 5-minute limit runs out. Most of their opponents get frustrated, tired, and eventually forfeit. There's a second way of winning by deception at this game. I will try explaining it without boring you. In order to play this game, you have to create matching sets of at least 3 cards of the same group. For example, 4, 5, 6 of clubs, or 3, 4, 6, 7 of hearts, etc. You start with 11 cards. The more or bigger sets you make, the more points you gather. So in order to win, you have to eventually get more cards. Each turn you take, you can either A, draw one card from the deck, or B, take all the cards from the discard pile. Then you discard 1 card. The game rule clearly states that in order to take the discard pile, you have to use one of the cards in the discard pile to create and complement one of your sets, and then put down your set in order to prove that you did, in fact, use a card from the discard pile. The discard pile is one of the most wanted things in the game, because you gather a lot of cards at once and take better chances at gathering points. Not a lot of websites gave you the option to play Bariba. Around that time, I only knew one website that had a flaw that was extremely abused by sly players: the second deception method. This flaw did not require the player to justify taking the discard pile. You could just take it without putting down any set or justify your move in any way. So a lot of players at every one of their turns simply took the discard pile, discarded 1 card, exactly the same card at every turn, so they wouldn't let their opponent gather cards. The opponent was forced to draw every turn and gave up valuable cards since they couldn't gather more than 11 cards. The sly opponent every turn took the discard pile that had 2 cards and left only 1 card in the discard pile. Their opponent could draw a card, discard 1, thus making the discard pile 2 cards. So at each turn, the sly opponent would gain 1 more card while their opponent would gather none. This resulted in the sly opponent eventually gathering enough cards to win, while their opponent kept the original number of 11 cards that hardly allowed them to create a set or 2. If you were aggressive enough, you could also start playing a second deception method against them, taking that 1 single card from the discard pile and giving 1 back, etc. But this simply could go on forever, with the game never ending, and most players didn't have the patience or the stomach for that, except me. So one day, around 8 p.m., I create a table for Bariba. I set my options like always, 1 minute for each player. An opponent enters, so I click Start. He clicks as well. After the game started, to my horror, I see that he changed the time setting to 5 minutes. Immediately, I knew what that meant, that he intended to use the first deception method in order to make me forfeit. Man, I can't even describe how much I hated those guys. They took forever, busted my nerves, and made the game not enjoyable at all. That night I was at my wit's end with them. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and started playing. And wouldn't you know it, he took the whole 5 minutes to complete his turn. Not only that, but he actually used the second deception method as well. The scumbag of scumbags. I took a few turns normally. Just a few seconds each turn while he used the whole 5 minutes. 20 minutes have passed. Normally, we would have been halfway through, but the game was just starting. I sent a couple of messages on the chat asking to go faster. He completely ignored me. All the while, he chose to take all the cards from the discard pile as well at each turn. Second deception method. Well, that was it, I've had it. Two can play this game. I opened a movie on my PC and set a 4-minute and 45-second timer for each turn I took. And then started taking the discard pile at each turn as well, while I used my whole 5-minute time limit at each turn. I only played 5 to 6 seconds before my time ran out, so at each turn the discard pile only had one card. And we kept doing that without allowing the other one to gather any cards at all. We each remained with very few cards for hours, and both of us took 5 minutes to complete their turn. As I said, a typical Bariba game takes around 40 to 45 minutes. In our case, hours have passed, and we were at the same spot we began. At first, I thought he would get tired easily. Admittedly, he was tougher than I thought. I watched 2 movies, and he was still going strong. The audacity on this guy. I was tired and sleepy, but so determined to not let him have his way. So I put a 3rd move in. I was a college student with all the time in the world. Around 1:40 a.m., he started getting tired. Instead of using the whole 5 minutes, he started playing a little faster. He maybe used 3 to 3 minutes 30 seconds. It was obvious he was folding. I was very pleased with this, but still kept playing the same pace. Around 2 a.m., 6 hours after we started our game, he dropped both his deception methods and started playing normally. Each one of his turns was only seconds. He was clearly tired and wanted out. Oh no, you piece of shit. You're not getting off this easily. I'm so mad and tired because you made me sit all night doing the exact same move at each turn. I will make you regret it. So I kept using both deception methods. I used my timer normally and watched my 3rd movie like I watched the other 2. He sat there and endured all of it. The game kept going for another 2 hours. The game ended after 8 hours, at exactly 4 a.m. While he was tired, couldn't wait to get out. Played as fast as possible while sending a few messages to speed it up, which I completely ignored. What was the best part, you ask? That I also won. 3. So about a dozen years ago, I was in a great paying job, but the work environment was absolutely atrocious. I spent the entire year I was there looking for another job. Finally got an offer elsewhere, at a hefty pay cut, but I leapt at it. Now this place, a very small company, said they were looking for a mid-level software developer. They realized I was a senior developer, but the manager said, "I'm not really sure what to offer, as we've never hired a senior developer before." That explanation sounds a little funny, but ultimately it turned out as such. They'd start me out at a certain amount a year, a mid-level developer's salary. And at my 1-year review, they'd give me a raise between certain amounts, depending on how things went. And it would have amounted to somewhere between a 6 to 12% raise. It's just a salary, with benefits, no bonuses, but I was fine with that. A little weird that they tried to start a new employee with only 1 week of vacation time instead of 2. The way every other place I've worked does, but they offered me the 2 up front. So I did some work on a legacy product, but they mostly had me working on some completely new feature that integrated with the existing product. A year goes by, and I like the place. It's small, but the team is good, and they had me move them to using Eclipse. They were using a text editor, albeit a text editor that had a very convenient compile this source file now feature. Most of the team loved it, and the assistant manager was so delighted with the IDE that she stated, "I'll give it up when they pry it from my cold dead fingers." So I do a little work on the legacy product. I do a lot of work on the new product, and I work on some customer conversions, converting their data to work on our software when they were on different software before. I also did refactoring, trying to, actually make use of parent and child classes properly, rather than relying on the massive amount of copy-paste and code duplication that existed there. Me and one of the other guys, we'll call him Z, who was my mentor at the company. But I was his mentor in furthering his programming style, tried to convince the manager to let us set up a source control system. The current system was that everyone worked off of a single copy of the source code on a shared network drive, which was backed up to tape every night. The manager resisted. We even suggested he let us take one of the old junk PCs from the storage room and set up a very small repository just to experiment with and make sure it worked as we planned, i.e. Hello World and programs and files of that small scale, before trying to move their stuff to it. Manager wouldn't budge. My review is late, several months late, but we were busy, and the manager said it was the most busy year he recalls them having. Also, I'd scheduled my 2-week vacation so that I could fly out to visit my parents. During this time, I'd gotten calls about other jobs, but I mostly blew them off. I knew for a fact where my salary would be when I got my review, and I was happy with that. Still, the calls came here and there. My review finally comes, and it's almost glowing. 1 or 2 minor hiccups, but overall they were very pleased with me. My raise? $0.
Well, you know, I can't really present a raise to the owner since you haven't mastered any pieces of the legacy software. I mean, I had you working on the new stuff, but there was always time for learning on the legacy system.
There was always time during their busiest ever year, so busy that my review was 5 months late. I grumbled. The 2 guys I worked with the most were jaw-dropping shocked when I told them, although one of the older guys there did sort of say words to the effect of, "I can't say that's the first time that's happened here." I dug up the old email from before I was hired and forwarded it to him. He took several days to respond. He never takes that long to respond. He came up with some cockamamie word game about how things didn't go that well this year, trying to play the, "Oh, I meant going well overall, not going well with your performance." So I kept working anyway, but I followed up on the most recent call about a potential job. It was the same pay I was making at this place, but with bonuses and better benefits, and half the distance and time to drive, none of the tolls. So I snuck out to interview at the new place, seemed to go well, and we struck a deal. I gave them a start date of after my vacation. Went back to my current job and played along for a little bit. They also went to job fairs, looking to hire someone straight out of college. Also now the manager was interested in source control. One of the other developers said, "Well, last year it was your idea, but this year it's his idea?" Interestingly, I briefly met the one graduating student they eventually hired. So it comes up to the point where my vacation is about to start. I go down to the CTO's office and give my 2 weeks' notice the day before my leave. He seemed a little thrown by that, and commented something about how they usually expect to have the 2 weeks to transition. I said I agreed with him, but I pointed out that my manager made certain promises, my review was glowing, and my raise was somehow 0. He didn't quite address that, but made a cryptic sort of comment, "X doesn't really share very well." I never knew if that meant my manager doesn't let the rest of the team know what he did, or meant that he somehow benefits from keeping the costs down. I later was given to understand that the CTO and the owner might well have known or been in on the plan to stiff me on the raise. I did have a talk with my manager, of course, and he did say, "Well, I guess I'm the bad guy on this," though he didn't seem particularly remorseful. There was a shocking moment of candor. "But we did get what we needed from you." I suspect that manager's raise was based on how well he did cost control, though. I mean, I was driving an older vehicle, and the manager was driving a new-ish Acura SUV. But giving my 2 weeks' notice on the day before my vacation was malicious compliance that I took with great relish. Epilogue. Years later, I'm working at another company about 2 miles from that place. A colleague of mine actually told me he was going to interview at the place with the dickbag manager. He also told me who was interviewing him, Z. Z was a good guy, and one of the 2 that was shocked at my lack of raise. I told my buddy, "Yeah, Z is a good guy, but ask him if X is going to be your manager, because if so, you're not interested." Z actually told my colleague, "Yeah, HRM King 5 was great. And, well, I was his mentor at the company here. I felt more like he was a mentor to me. X did screw him, but don't worry, X isn't part of the picture for this job. Also, that new person we hired, she says she can always tell when she runs into HRM King 5's code. The code style is so much better. My colleague ultimately didn't take the job with them, though. 4. I used to manage a Cadillac dealership's network a couple years ago. There was a car salesman who also liked to study computers on his spare time. Unfortunately, that also meant he knew way too much to be absolutely dangerous. I would constantly get complaints about him bunking down on a specific floating desk on the floor and locking it out from anyone to use but him. I reached out to management about it, but they didn't want to do anything, even though he was bypassing many security features like local admin. He used to put an end to give himself local admin, web filtering unapproved apps, remoting, etc. All via USB with a bunch of portable apps. Management said, "Why are you coming to us about an IT problem?"
This isn't a management problem when it involves computers. Isn't that your job? I'm pretty sure that's in your job description.
You get the idea. But I was sick and tired of getting calls and messages daily about this one guy. So I decided that if management wasn't going to have my back on this issue, then I guess I have free rein to handle it how I please, right? Since I was dealing with an above-average user, I decided to go to the furthest extreme. I took a machine, imaged it to the same image as the floating desk machines, and went to town planning all the restrictions needed. BIOS locked with password, boot to USB disabled, chassis locked and closed, no CMOS reset, auto login to a generic sales account, USB disabled in Windows, desktop redirected to a folder on the file server with locked permissions, no delete, specific icons only. Chrome browser only, no IE or anything else. Chrome bookmark set to only what is needed, log off removed, only restart or shutdown. Even if it did manage to somehow log off, it would just log back into sales, and a litany of other basic Windows restrictions that essentially silos the machine to either Chrome or their car sales software. I brought all my changes and my purchase requisition for the locks over to management, and was approved with no questions. I sold it as a necessary security measure, and threw my weight around about how this is in my job description to address it and implement it. Spent an early Monday morning rolling out all the changes before he came in. Late afternoon rolls around and he finally shows up. I'm off the clock, but decided to stay to see the fallout. He walks in, makes a beeline to his desk, and watched as he sat confused at everything. I can't log out. I can't boot my USB. Windows can't see my USB either. I can't do anything at all. I watched in pure satisfaction as he just got up from the chair and walked around the sales floor aimlessly with nothing to do. The bonus part is, after all the changes, whenever a different salesperson complained about the changes, all I needed to say was sorry for the inconvenience. The changes were necessary due to a salesperson messing with the computers. I'm not allowed to say who it was, though, so unfortunately changes will need to stay. They all knew who it was, though. 5. This was during my time in college in 2015. For the sake of the story, I have to start on my first day, and what led up to the point of why this store was hemorrhaging and had an abysmally high turnover rate. I started and soon figured out that the store was due for a complete makeover and floor and product renovation, as well as a completely new manager, who we shall name Richard. Richard hired me, but the other employees were hired under the previous store manager. I trained under the previous paint manager and hoped to learn the trade so I could better assist customers and increase my knowledge and hourly wage. We also had to learn to drive a forklift and how to cut and program keys for cars and house. The worst part is that during the transition of changing the layout of the floor plan, I had to learn where products currently were and then where they were going to be moved to. The store had a policy that every customer had to be greeted and helped no matter how busy we were, unless they refused our help. Over 2 months, approximately 6 employees left inside the hardware store, and another 4 left our garden center department. Richard had to work the garden center and hated it because he left his AC cushy office and constantly took it out on the hardware employees inside. And since we weren't cross-trained for garden center and hardware, none of us could really be moved over. Plus, there was the fear that if he did, that more people would leave. Fast forward about 1 year, and then our paint manager left due to overwork and poor scheduling by our new manager. He stretched us too thin and made him open and close the store numerous times. We were open from 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., so our previous paint manager worked several hours into overtime every week. I became the new paint manager immediately because I was the only employee left who was trained and remained from before the floor plan change. I had to train new employees. Richard always found an excuse not to train. On how to make paint via our automatic machine and our manual machine that was for specialized industrial paints. I also had to train all new employees on key and key fobs. I was given a 12-cent raise as compensation, yes. After my promotion, I met with our district paint manager, Kevin, to go over anything I needed to know, especially how to order paint. It was the only thing I was not taught. Kevin told me I can send a picture of the order filled out to his personal phone, and he would place the order since our internet was so slow at our facility. He brought his personal hotspot anytime he needed internet access, because our computers usually took about 25 minutes to log in. It was equivalent of dial-up, and we could not use the computers at the register for anything other than checking customers out. So when it came time to order paint, I filled out the proper form and pulled out my phone and took all the pictures I needed and sent them to Kevin. Cue Richard from the garden center, drenched in sweat. He came barreling in and pulled me to the side and said, "It pisses me off that we're outside busting our butts in the sun, and I come in and you're on your phone goofing off." I explained I was ordering paint and that it was for business anyways. He told me to follow the company policy of no phones at work and to use the computers in the back. I swallowed my pride and my argument I had and set up my malicious compliance. Next time for paint order came through, I wrote down what we needed and went to the break room. Between the boot time and internet login to the paint order site, it was about an hour long. The store was in chaos. The new employees couldn't find anything they needed for customers. We had several people at the paint desk asking for samples. These required manual mixing because our automatic machine could not process pint-sized cans. And I hadn't trained anyone on that yet. The keys needed to be cut, and the line was almost out the door at the checkout line. Customers were walking out of the store and filing complaints. This was a cell phone store by an old family. We had several returning customers. Some knew the family personally and called the owners to complain. On top of the chaos during the renovation, Richard decided to remove a cash register in the garden center and make everyone check out inside, so we got everyone to check out, and it made work that much busier on the hardware side. Richard couldn't help because he never took the time to listen to my training on keys and paint, so he was absolutely useless to the new employees. I finally returned and he asked, "Where the hell have you been?" I sat in the back ordering paint. Richard said, "You could have used your phone this one time. You didn't see how busy we were?" I said, "Yes, I saw how busy we were, but if I don't order paint before 10 a.m., we don't get it on time, and we will be out of stock for a week. And I'm just following the no phone policy you made very clear to follow." He huffed and just walked away, more pissed than before. Shortly after, Richard got Kevin to go through the paint order process and form. From now on, Richard ordered paint because it also gave him an excuse to sit inside away from the garden center. Eventually, the new employees left, and I stayed, because I was about to graduate anyways. I purposely didn't train any new employees on any process in the store, because, come to find out, I never actually received paint manager title on paper, because it was supposed to come with a $2 raise. I was only given the responsibilities, and it was never reported to the store owners by Richard. I came in a few months later, and Richard was moved to the other North Side store and was no longer a manager. The store was still in chaos. The store owner was there and even asked a few questions about paint, and wanted to know some ins and outs of what sold best. I still had a few friends there, and they told me that the store owners have to stop by regularly to fix the mess Richard had made during his time there, and that people were still complaining. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 137. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do share it with everyone you know. And if you're a new subscriber, or an old subscriber, if you're a subscriber, please ding that dong. That's actually very helpful as well. Okay, let's see. This is a day of the week that comes after Friday, but before Sunday. Yes, it certainly does. All right. I think there's an anonymous credit on this, but there's no shoutouts. Yeah, that's right. No shoutouts. All right. Let's see. Hellfreezer's question of the day: what is a thing you want, you have no need for, that doesn't exist, that you wish did? For me, it just popped into my head today actually, as I was recording, mood hula hoops. And I only want them to exist just for the weirdness of it. Leave your ideas in the comments below, although obviously nothing you're planning on inventing and becoming very, very rich with. If you are, then, well, best of luck to you. Respect. Okay. And wait, since this is the day after Friday but before Sunday, I'll try and do a stream later, a gaming stream. We'll see, but no promises. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.